So I just decided that I would try and concentrate as much as I can in as small place as I can. So I got the idea of not putting vowels in the titles. That means multimedia consumption globally. And that is just one of the many graphs that you can find about what we use our time for in terms of using media. So that's just an example of, so the orange is print, and then the light green is internet, the blue is analog, TV or digital, the purple is radio, digital or analog, the red is cinema, the pink is outdoor activities, and the green is wireless connectivities, and the yellow is games. What that illustrates, and that's just a projection up to 2020, is basically that at the beginning of the century, up till half of it, people were mostly reading, those who could read. And then from the beginning of cinema and TV and radio, well, basically people read less and dedicated more time to audiovisual activities. Makes perfect sense. It's just easier, and you don't need to be looking at the radio or the TV even to enjoy it. And those are just some of the typical products. So you see newspapers, books, literature, magazines, comic books, films, and video games. My area in particular is video games, or like the way I would like to call it, is multimedia interactive entertainment software, which is what that means. And I chose this game because I think it will illustrate nicely a progression. Since we're talking about ages and digital age, I think it's quite proper to talk about something very, very old that is being made very, very new. So Warriors Legends of Troy is a regular hack and slash game. Basically, kill anything that moves with your blade. Inspired in a mythical, classical Greek era. And that's fantastic. So when you have the video game production, when someone is in the video game industry is thinking, okay, well, why don't we make a video game? Well, that's fine, that's our business. They're thinking, and then they come up with the idea of, let's make a game about classic Greek and the warriors in classic Greek, in ancient Greece. And that way we can utilize what's being popular. I mean, for whatever reason, as much as we hate violence, we love heroes. And heroes get to be heroes by being violent. But anyway, the video game production goes something like this. You have a game design document, there's a prototype development, something that kind of works and proves that they can do it. Then they go into pre-alpha, so they start testing, and yes, this is functional. The interactivity we can get is something new, or something that we can use to impress our gamers. And then they go into full alpha, beta testing, full beta, when the testing has been almost completed. The release candidate is then when functionally everything seems to be in the right place. Then that goes to the age rating boards, and they say, well, this should be a 12-year-old, this should be an 18-year-old. And then they go into first-party approvals, so PlayStation, Microsoft, or Nintendo need to approve that they want that game in their console, approve their terminology, approve everything. If they say no, it's a no. And you get the release approval with everything that is correct, and then you have a game, such as Warriors Legends of Troy. Now, when you look at that, you probably think something, I hope, like me, what's missing there? Because when everybody thinks about products and films, media, whatever, everybody assumes that, well, it's a global market. Well, it's not global, and just you translate it. So what's missing there is really the language aspect of it. You cannot assume or presume that that is there. So when you go into global production, normally a video game development company will have these elements. There's a production manager, which will coordinate programmers, audio artists, game writers, game designers, graphic artists, game testers, and they wouldn't just produce a game, something that works, and release it. And that's how it works for any normal game, any small game, any game that aims at being nationally distributed. And nowadays, that is not really an option, unless you're really, really a small, garage kind of company with 3 people. That is not really an option. So what you need to complete the cycle is localization and localization QA. Big companies that know and that have been in the industry for long enough, know that they need to integrate that. And they're struggling. They're still struggling to integrate localization, translation, and localization QA in the structure. They still don't understand it very well. But anyway, that is what allows them to do what they want to do, which is the SimShip, the simultaneous shipment, which is global release every country in the world or every country they're targeting. Normally nowadays, 12 languages, 15 languages. Any big titles, if you go to very, very popular titles with film ties in or literature ties in, Disney, that could be into 25, 30 titles, 30 countries. That means that the localization and localization QA is all done at the same time, or just a couple of weeks or 4 weeks later, right after the English original or the Japanese original has been finished. English and Japanese, because they're the biggest game developer languages or countries. But more countries now in Europe are actually producing. So the direction of translation is also changing. But anyway, so there is mass consumption, and mass consumption means mass production. And that means that we, translators, one way or the other, linguists, one way or the other, we become part of that conveyor belt. We need to be there. If we're not there, the product does not go global. We need to be there one way or the other. And that's just 3 images. I thought that they are good and they are bad in a way. They are good. They illustrate how productive we can be, how clever we can be. That's the printing press or the press process of the Guardian newspaper. This is Google, and this down here is Blizzard. So Google, they do software products. Blizzard do video game products. In any case, we are all part of the conveyor belt. We're all part of that. We're all part of a huge machinery. And that reminds me pretty much, if you think of a factory, a car factory. A car factory, you see, well, where are the people here? Well, some of it, people are using the machines that make the cars. And that has a bearing with when we come to talk about tools and translation tools and machine. So I suppose my biggest concern with multimedia products is what it says there. Multimedia and interactivity are the Trojan horses for texts. When you have a product that is interactive, when you have a text that is interactive, such in the case of video games, although as well in websites and any kind of utility software, that is a Trojan horse for your text. Anything you have written has to be broken down in such a way that the machine can process the reactions, the options, the choices of the user, the choices of the player, the gamer, the user, whoever the person is. And that means that is going to affect directly on the way you translator, you writer, you linguist work with this text. It's no longer like if you do translation for a manual or for a literature. It's no longer one word after the other, and the information on the page, that is what it is. It's all of it that is not there. And in most cases, if you work in localization or in game localization or any other software localization, you know that you rarely get access to the actual product, ever. You translate from a very strange type of format, and that will become part of the product, but you never see that. That means you are translating in a way blindfolded, because you don't get the view of it. So my visual representation of that is something like this. You have that linguistic variables change history. Linguistic variables are what computer programs need to have in order to leave the blank in the code to allow for your choice, the user. So you can choose option A, B, C, or D, that needs to be put into the code, right? The code, software program, imagine software like a machine. You press that button, you press that button. So that button, virtually speaking, becomes a variable. In our case, if it is text, it's a linguistic variable. So you can have your heroes, and that's fantastic. But the thing with video games is, well, it's not really their story. It's my story. I am the player. This is where I become the hero. And it's fantastic because video games allow you to change things. You just can't change the people. Well, I don't want Hector and Paris. I want Helena. Oh, I know, a very cool guy to play Achilles. And that's what happens with the game code. The game code needs to be constructed in that way. But for you, the translator, normally you get fed a table, a spreadsheet with thousands of lines out of context, and then you have to imagine the rest. If you're very, very lucky and you're working house, you may actually see the game, but you may probably not see it ever. That is very frustrating. That is almost against everything we as linguists, as translators do. We do language. You cannot give me broken language. And this is, again, a very cryptic way of showing this, but bear with me. The T for translator or author, the A for audio, the R for reading, the V for visual, the U for user, the M for market. So if you think of the example of Troy and this idea of Achilles and the Trojan Wars and the Iliad and all this. From the point of view of the art, the story was telling the story. A classic Greek vase like that one would tell a story. And if you look at it, actually, there are the names that are written there on the vase. Who's Achilles, who's Agamemnon, who's Hector. And that is the way of telling a story. You don't need translation for that. Fair enough. When you go to the manuscript of Homer, that wouldn't need translation. That has been translated. But initially, when Homer wrote this, he didn't write it for people to read it. It was basically writing it for him and the few fellow actors who could read and act, and then they would recite this, so people would listen to it, right? The way people would enjoy this creation was by listening in theater houses. If you go further, in the Gutenberg era, when we have books, most people still did not read, of course, so they would still just access this by listening to it. So again, the written translation was there, but there was no need for an audiovisual consideration. You go a bit further, the first translation into English, or one of the most popular by Alexander Pope. This is already when people can already read. By this time, there is an industry. There is an industry of professional writers and professional translators and professional distributors, which before it was just a very small grouping of people. By the time the film came around, the popular film with all the big actors, American actors, there was even a bigger industry, and now this becomes audiovisual. It becomes audiovisual, it means it needs a particular type of translation, which is dubbing and subtitling, or audio description, or subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing. And all these aspects they need to be included in our training of translation. So this training for this type of translation cannot be the same as the training for the translation of the book, obviously. And that was probably mostly distributed in Europe and the US. Finally, what we get with the video game is that there is even a bigger industry, and you can amalgamate all of them because they tie in different industries. And then you have audiovisual, and then you have people who can read the product, but are actually interacting with it. And that's why you have the gamepad there. Not only that, you have products that cater for different audiences. So not like literature or not like science, that is a particular grown-up adult, probably male, probably white. Now you have products that are for men, for women, for young, for children, it doesn't matter. They're products for all types of readers and users or viewers. That changes us. That changes what we do, and that changes how we go about it. So the conclusion of the learning from this is that products impose tools that change the tasks, that change professions, that change the tools. And then we need to change the training. And it's part of it's not like we have an option. It's not an option to teach translation nowadays, like you teach translation for translation literature, or the translation, or you cannot teach translation for films, like you teach translation for video games, because they have different requirements. So, in a way, the text, what I like about this is that, first of all, written text, written language is already a tool, right? We acquire speaking. People acquire, they can speak, but they don't acquire writing. You have to learn writing. Writing itself is a tool. After that, all of it has been a process of learning to use different tools to do the task. So we do it doesn't matter what you use. You can use a little piece of cane, then a rope, you can use a stick, you can use a feather, you can use the typesetting that Gutenberg brought probably from China. You can use your own typewriter, and some of us have used those. You have your tool, like the dictionary, then you go into writing intertitles in the film industry, and then subtitles and subtitles in the theaters. You have teletext subtitling, which is again a different tool. You go into computing, and then you have the translation of software, and then we have all these tools. It's always been a process for us. Those of you who have more experience than me would have used many of these tools, if not all of them. So you go from the pen to the paper to the computer to the automatic subtitling. And these programs here, some of you will probably know, this is an alignment tool where you align texts and then you can source whatever is common and reuse it. This is a visual localization tool where you localize each of the buttons of each in the program you're using. This is a subtitling tool where partially the software can automatize some of the processes, but not all. This is actually down here a game localization tool that actually goes into the game engine, the actual code that makes the game, and it builds the trees of conversation between characters in the game. And then the translators use that. The writers need to use that to construct the dialogue, and the translators need to go back to see the logic of how the dialogue flows, because it breaks up in different pathways. And finally, you have an image of Google Translate to illustrate automatic translation, machine translation, any other thing that certainly is coming. One way or the other, it is coming, although it is still rubbish as far as I know. A lot of people will be against me for doing that. But the thing is, all these changes that we have always been doing, it's just creating for us educators and researchers problems, because there are new professions. There are new professions that first of all, we need to discover, we need to learn, we need to acquire the skills, and then we need to teach it. And sometimes this is quite difficult. And whether in managing, in engineering, translating, I think linguists and translators, even if you feel yourself more just as a pure linguist, just give me a good text and I give you a good translation, I don't think that's no longer an option unless you are lucky enough and good enough in your area that you can put your rules. We need to learn more skills. I think we probably need to learn more skills to survive. And, oops, that's also moved. Not only that, there's no new user phenomena, which it stands between the illegal, the altruistic, and the manipulated. Illegal because there is a group of fans that actually get together and localize video games. They say, oh, we like that video game, but it's not in our language. Oh, let's translate it. Hey, fun. Someone gets into the code, hacks the code, breaks up the link, takes up the strings, distributes it. They have a project management. They do everything. They do it for free. They put it on the website. That's done. It's not really legal, but it's not really illegal, and it would be worse to chase them. Why? They're actually making the game more popular. The logjam, we organize some translation, and we do some translation for the IGDA group. The IGDA is the International Game Developers Association. So I don't believe in working for free, but we do some translation for free for them because that's an association, non-profit association. So we do that altruistically because we like it. And then you have a Steam translation. Some of you may be clients of Steam. Steam is a big, imagine a company with a big server with a lot of games. You register and you can play any games, right? Some of the games they have, they are asking the users to translate them. And some users actually say, yeah, well, okay, I will translate that. They don't get anything. They don't get a free pass, they don't get a game, they don't get anything. So what is that? Is that manipulation? Well, I suppose they're choosing to do it, but it's a strange area. In any case, I think higher education, translation studies, and researchers, we are all challenged by multimedia products and the lack of access in the digital age because of how difficult the products are in themselves, just to even to be able to comprehend them. A book, you have a book and the book is there. That's all you need. If you have a video game, there's nothing you can do but use it. You cannot go into the code and then you have 3 brains like that because it's protected for you not to do it. So for us to do that research, for us to do that teaching, we need to use other methods. And I think that's basically all I have to say today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Miguel. A very, very interesting presentation and a topic that is very new, as you said, but as you mentioned as well, it's taken over the film industry. It took over the film industry many years ago in terms of revenue and income generation. So, you know, mysteriously missing in education, in research, and so on. I think we've got about a couple of minutes for a question or two before we can get Kim moving to this other computer.
Are there big or the best companies in the industry that are willing to work with academia? Do they have time to help you?
Okay.
Is it in their interest?
Is it in their interest? I thought it would be, and all the people I know are personally interested, but legally not interested or unable. Whenever I ask for partnership, knowledge transfer, even I offer to work for them for free. They just say, that would be great, let me check. And normally the answer is nothing. So it's strange, I don't really understand why.
Can I add to that? This is a very competitive industry, so they're very cagey about letting any information out. So that seems to be one of their biggest concerns. And this whole thing is under wraps, and a researcher potentially leaking information is a real sort of threat to their livelihood. That seems to be their thinking.
Yeah, but even something that is already old, I say, okay, let's work on a game that's 5-year-old. I don't mind. No, because they don't want anyone to know the processes, to know who said what when. No, they just don't want to. And I've asked many. I really have over the past 7 years.
Yeah, the people who are working on translating and localizing video games, are they generally gamers who've become translators or translators who've become gamers?
Good question, actually. I think very early on in the industry, like 15, 20 years ago, they would have picked just any gamers who happen to speak another language for whatever reason, and they would use them. Then they realized that it is easier to teach someone to play a game than it is to teach someone to speak a language. So they started using other type of graduates, so language graduates, translation graduates, and now we have some good connections with some companies, and the postgraduates from our masters tend to go to these companies, and they are very grateful because the in-house training process is shrunk to a day, whereas before it would be a week or two.